Training camp is here and the Dynasty landscape is changing by the day. Which players are making a move? Which depth charts are getting flipped upside down? And which training camp reports are actually worth paying attention to? Let's break things down, biggest training camp updates, and what they mean for your Dynasty teams. I am joined today by legend in the making and in the flesh here and football guy's favorite, Sigmund Bloom. Sig, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a great timing here. You've been doing some really good. The whole staff in general does these
Mhm.
training camp reports. They're fantastic, and I think they're one of the greatest things that we do. And you've been doing pulling some highlights out of there, and I want to dive into those. But kind of high level, what's your assessments so far? What you seeing in training camp right now? Any particular things stand out that you are
Oh,
moving the needle?
oh man. I hope everybody's answer to this would be like 17 things are rushing into my head at the same time, like all trying to go through the door at once. So I
I
can't
know.
even say any of them. You got Buffalo right behind you. I'm excited for Buffalo. I think that you could see a whole different attitude in terms of the ceiling for the offense every week and just how the offense looks. I'm excited for Malik Willis. I think there's a lot of signal that he's on that upper end of his range of outcomes. I'm excited. I'm worried about Indianapolis. Although there's some positive things coming up about Daniel Jones, um, Parker Washington. I mean, we talked about that enough. I just want to make sure to put a point of emphasis on that. I'm actually optimistic, uh, tentatively optimistic about Cyrus Allen, as long as he's, I think maybe if there's something both dynasty and redraft is these players. There's a lot of stuff in preseason and training camp you can feel free to ignore. The one part you should be putting your jeweler's eye on is rookies. And Cyrus Allen is a good example. Jacoby Lane, Malachi Fields. I mean, there's so many of them. There's Dejon Stribling probably at the top of the list, right? And I'll leave it with this so I don't go on and on and on and just do the whole show. We answered one question today. That when you look back at the biggest hits, Puka Nakua,
Yeah.
that first chapter. Look, this first chapter of Stribling's career, this first chapter of Denzel Boston's career, this first chapter of Cyrus Allen's career, it does not mean that they're surefire hits. But if they were going to be a hit, this is how the first chapter would go. So
Yeah.
their value still has a lot of room to grow. So, if you're holding a Stribling, an Allen, a Lane, a Boston, a Concepcion, don't think that selling them right now and getting like a 10% or 20% return on investment is the move, because this is probably just getting started.
Yeah, I think that that's a fantastic point there. And it is so interesting how we spend, especially in the dynasty space in general, football in general, looking at rookies and talking about these rookies for 6 months in a row. And then we get these breakouts, and it's never the guys that we've been talking about for 6 months. It seems like it's always the ones that have been kind of hanging under the radar a little bit there. Caleb Douglas breaking out in Miami. I was talking with Jason Sarney last night, that covers the Dolphins, and he was talking about Malik Willis' point about how Malik just looks so much better than expectations. And I think that's one of fascinating things to unpack, of because you look at like a player, Devon Achane, when you're looking at his value in redraft. I think I've been making the argument for 2.5 months now that he's been argued that he's valued at his floor as a mid to even late, sometimes second round pick, because if we didn't have any environmental concerns with Miami, he would be pretty much locked into the top 6 or 7 overall. And so having the early returns on good news on Malik Willis, that's a great point there. We do have bullet points that we do want to run through coming out of these. You've done the last 2 weeks. You'll do 2 more coming up, because we do as a staff pull together these training camp reports, have bullet points, highlights in depth on all 32 teams, and you've got the 7 things that you want to see or that are most notable coming out of these reports here with week 2. I mean, the biggest one right now, I think, especially dynasty space, fantasy in general, that Jeremiah Love high ankle sprain. Obviously, we can the usage of Jeremiah Love in the preseason, it is what it is. And teams make decisions; they go their own direction, whatever it might be. What's your read here on? I guess some of it's is this going to impact his entire season and really pull him back from where the expectations were? And I think the other part of it, you look at Tyler Algier. Teams absolutely love Tyler Algier, and signing him 2-year, $12.5 million deal. I mean, we did take 3 years before we really saw Bijan Robinson reach that level of expectation. Is Jeremiah Love married here to Tyler Algier, kind of facing the same thing, despite how much steam and hype there was on him this offseason?
Yeah, this was a disastrous development. First of all, yes, you should not assume that Jeremiah Love's going to be an impact player for your team this year. Again, there are a lot of stories that when players have breakout years or career years, very rarely do they start with he had an injury in training camp that cost him X number of weeks of practice.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the lost year narrative starts with, well, it was, we were optimistic, and then that injury happened in training camp, and it was a lost year. I'm trying to say this every appearance. Something like Greg Rosenthal, who knows what he speaks of, said when I was asking him what fantasy players miss, because he's been on both sides of the fence, he said sometimes injuries are a lot worse than that on. He said last year the Chargers knew Ladd McConkey wasn't going to really contribute as much in August.
Yeah.
This is where like the Keenan Allen signing and Alec Pierce, like anything Alec Pierce does for the Colts is a plus right now. So, if you want to buy Alec Pierce cheap, wait a few more weeks. He'll get cheaper. That's what the Colts are telling us. So the Jeremiah Love thing, if you're looking immediately at your dynasty team, like I am, a team that needed running back one, well, you might have to keep looking. Number two, if you were worried about this situation, I'll bring up two names: Barkley with the Giants, Breece Hall with the Jets, still with the Jets. These are the kind of situations. You brought up Bijan with Atlanta, and maybe that's the glass half full take, is that there are some players that are so good it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We'll see. But just it's going to be bumpy. I think that it's probably an overreaction to sell Love right now, because what you really wanted was this long-term career arc of somebody that's going to be one of the best in the game for like 5, 6, 7 years. And even if that's delayed, if he is, and look, early, I mean, what we did see is a player who lived up to billing, now on a preseason field, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he did live up to billing. It's like, wow, yeah, he looks like a pretty special player. I think that if there's anything to do in Dynasty, maybe it is to dial up the Jeremiah Love team, assuming the rookie drafts have already happened, or the team that hasn't won one for a few leagues. I have a league that hasn't had the rookie draft yet, Jeff. And just do a price check, just do a price check. You probably aren't going to find middle ground, but hey, if Love comes out and like 3 weeks in aggravates the ankle, it was a lost season, maybe that's when and that team is looking for, you have David Montgomery. Maybe you can trade David Montgomery in a first for Jeremiah Love at that point, so lay that groundwork. I think if you trade him right now, you're probably selling low.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point, and that's something that I've just really tried in general in Dynasty. Anytime there's negative news on a player that you believe in the talent, just go out and see what that price might be and see if the person wants to get off them in Dynasty. I think that's a good general practice because, and the other good point I think that you made there is just talking about these injuries here. And I still see people talking about trying to explain what happened with Ladd McConkey last year. And it's like, he was hurt. He was injured. And I covered the Falcons for training camp, and one of the things that Drake London was talking about in training camp was that first week, like once you're out there and an offensive lineman steps on your hand or something, or steps on your toe, and you're like, oh my god, that hurts so bad, and then that happens in week 3, you've been calloused to that point where you're just like, okay, next play, got to keep rolling. And I do think that between either holdout guys or guys that have that injury seal broken in that period where those calluses are built up for the season for players to take it through, I mean, that impacts the performance across the entire season, just like you said there with McConkey. And so I think Love having this in here, I do think that I think we're seeing a change maybe with some of these bad teams where they're leaning more towards screw it on the defense and like just try to make sure we have a competent offense. And I feel like it used to be a bad team would be almost the other way, where they would be like, we're going to try to slow it down. We know we're bad. We don't want to get blown out of this. And some of me can't help but wonder if it's not NIL playing into it with the quarterback decisions, the ability to go back to college, these teams wanting to show these quarterbacks that, you can come here and we can help you succeed. I'm probably big braining that to some regard, but it does seem what we saw from Arizona last year, really, weren't trying to play winning football. They were just trying to score points. And I think that we might see a similar run out here with this Cardinals offense. But
Well, look, here's what I'll
Yeah,
piggyback your that on that too. Okay, is I've been saying for a few months now, don't ask why bad organizations do things that keep them bad. Although
yeah,
it can be entertaining to do that. Just assume that they will continue to do things that keep them bad. And where this comes in, and where, Jeff, I think that whether it's redraft or dynasty, but especially in dynasty, oh my, in dynasty, there's a very simplistic way of looking at this that I think people need to reframe. Okay. When you draft a player, trade for a player, pick up a player, it's like you're hiring that organization to develop your asset. Now, granted, people who have Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion right now are like, so what? They're getting early
yeah,
opportunity because that team is bad. They're going to show how good they are because that team is bad. And I get it. I get it. But still, like again, Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson. I mean, it's really hard for players to hit their top end range of outcomes in bad organizations. It's just really hard. And overall, we should probably trust teams that are good at developing their players, that are good at identifying what they do well and putting them in positions to do it. The Bears, the Jags, whatever. So I think because I saw someone say, you want to get into the discussion of why did the Cardinals do that? Because Robert Mays from The Ringer said that this was intentional, that they had seen that rookie running backs didn't get enough work in the preseason, and they think only live reps. And somebody said they got that from ChatGPT. I'm like, oh, that's probably it. That's probably it. Because where else would that? Where have you ever heard? Rookie running backs. Yeah, and he needs to. Because Sean Payton said Jonah Coleman was in 4 touches. I saw what I needed to see. It looked like what I had been seeing for weeks. That was plenty. I think he was trolling Arizona. If he wasn't, he's the type of dude that would be. But if he wasn't, the universe did it for us. The football gods did it for us. So I think that that's something you have to apply when you're thinking about trades, trading for players. It's just the ability of the organization to get the most out of a player. And we know that Arizona, the Jets, again, Cleveland, all these teams, maybe not Miami, but these teams that are in vying for Arch Manning or whoever it is, the own goals are going to keep coming.
yeah, absolutely. Before we move forward, make sure to like, subscribe, do all those fun, fantastic YouTube things. It really does help us grow the channel. And I mean, that's the number one thing that you can do to help. And we really do appreciate you all out there and giving us this opportunity to talk through this. We've talked through Cleveland here a couple times to keep the bad teams rolling, I guess, to some level. Casey Concepcion, the way that he was utilized in that first preseason game of schemed up touches, being involved in the run game, being involved in the punt return game. We had heard a solid study drumbeat about Denzel Boston early in camp. And so we hadn't heard quite as much about Casey Concepcion relative to Denzel Boston. And I know that in the spring OTAs, Isaiah Bond was a name that was mentioned. Mary Kay Cabot was still saying that Jerry Jeudy is going to be the number one receiver for this offense. Your week 1 bullet was Denzel Boston, camp riser. Now, Casey Concepcion here. Do you see, despite maybe concerns at quarterback or definite concerns at quarterback, despite organizational concerns, do you see this organization being able to get Concepcion up to speed immediately with fantasy utility? And if that happens, how does that affect the rest of this room here with Denzel Boston? Where's Jerry Judy's potential future land? Harold Fannin? Where do you see this
Yeah,
kind of coming down on this?
that last name is probably the most important one to talk about. But this is an odd situation. Todd Monken, I call him Marty Munkhauser. What I like about Todd Monken is he's very transparent. He seems like he's just got a kind of a. It's weird for an NFL head coach to be kind of lighthearted, but he is. And I don't know how much say he has over the decision of quarterback. I think he might not have very much. But I think
Yeah.
he does have say over the offense, the structure of the offense, who plays otherwise. And he just came out and said, because at the beginning of camp, it seemed like they were going to do like, well, let's mix and match, Bond and Judy and Boston
Yep.
and Concepcion. Let's see what we have here. And immediately Boston. And the other thing is, it isn't just buzz. It isn't just clips. It isn't just comments. It's also that Boston was getting snaps with the first team. Concepcion was getting more snaps with the first team. But then you have Todd Monken say something to the effect of like, I want to get the ball in the hands of this guy as much as I can. And they give him an end around kind of play in the red zone. He scores on it. He also meshes perfectly. Deshaun Watson's probably going to start. I forget who it was. Tony Grossi said, "You want to know why Deshaun Watson's on this team? Because of his contract." And yes, bad organizations will say, "Well, we're paying him $50 million, so we have to play him." I don't know how long he's going to last. He's not long, but at least at first, all he can do is like get the first read the guy. Like if you, as soon as Deshaun Watson drops back now, it seems like smoke just comes out of his ears. But if Todd Monken's like, when we have a pass play, you're just going to turn and throw it to Concepcion there. Let him do his thing. That seems like that'll work. Now, Shedeur Sanders, that's where we're going to see more of Denzel Boston because Shedeur will take a shot. He doesn't care. We probably will see Dylan Gabriel by the end of the year. Some people are saying he's actually been the best quarterback in practice. I don't know. And then there's Taylon Green. That may be like going down the UCLA quarterback that had my brain.
Huntley.
Not Huntley, the guy, 3 names, whatever. See, everyone's going to see how like my brain.
Oh, Dorian Thompson Robinson.
Dorian Thompson Robinson. My brain was saying Robinson Thompson. I knew that wasn't right. Anyway, like so that could be bad for Taylon Green. My point is that it's going to be bumpy. And we can see like which quarterbacks match up best with which receivers. But the guy we got to wonder about is Fannin. And look, if you want to go in and say like I'm going to buy Fannin, you might be right because I'll admit whiffing on the Fannin original eval because his athleticism just looks so weird compared to other NFL players. But it's so effective. It's just the dude is just a player. And last year, well, he was competing with, again, Isaiah Bond and Jerry Jeudy for targets, and he had a bit of a late season breakout. Now he's going to be even better in year 2, and he may be just so good that even with Concepcion and Boston doing what they're doing, he's still going to pay off at his ADP, and he still looked like an ascending player. But I think we could just as quickly see that, you know what, actually he is more of like a Jonnu Smith, Delaney Walker kind of player. He's not going to get up to that next level Antonio Gates, not that high, but you get it. Like get the Matt Waldman access of talent, So, if we go out there in the first few weeks and Concepcion and Boston are more attractive targets than Fannin, well, your sell high window is gone. So I just think as a Fannin, if you have Fannin, you have to ask yourself, if Fannin's your number 2 tight end right now, if you got Loveland and Fannin in your rookie draft last year, or if you have Fannin behind a Bowers or a McBride, I'm trying to sell him. I think this is a good time to cash out because tight ends can be very hard to sell unless they really pull away from the pack.
Yeah, I think that's, just thinking back to last summer, we were coming off that Jonnu Smith breakout season, and the whole talk, it seemed to be coaches have figured out how to unlock this tight end that they couldn't figure out for decades, how to unlock that archetype of a tight end. And then 1 year later, Jonnu Smith is basically out of the league. And so I think it is so fickle sometimes. And it is, especially those breakout seasons, but especially those safety targets, those kind of the struggle targets that just get through this season. And I think that Fannin was that for sure last year. But I think in the Watson point, to me, I've been thinking a lot about problem solvers. And I think that Watson is somebody that never really encountered any problems in his life. Like coming up, he was told that he was God's gift, essentially. Immediate star at Clemson, winning national championships, goes to Houston, immediately figuring out, and he was humbled in a way that he can't rebuild from. Is I think the problem that they're running into with Deshaun Watson there at that point. But it seems to be we can't do an episode of the Dynasty Show without talking about Carolina with Jonathan Brooks. That run out with Jonathan Brooks now with the Chuba Hubbard injury popping up, opening this way up for Jonathan Brooks potentially. And I've been of 2 minds throughout. It's Jonathan Brooks and I think Tank Dell kind of put me in 2 different places here where we feel so good. We're so excited for Jonathan Brooks, for Tank Dell to get back and to be able to realize some of the promise that we saw. But then there's layers beyond that of actually, okay, he's on the field. He's making plays now. This is awesome. Well, now we need him to handle volume and be a fantasy asset. And so I think that's where I struggle. I think on players like Jonathan Brooks, players like Tank Dell that are coming back from multiple setbacks in a row. And it did seem to be early back in spring. There was a lot of buzz from Panthers beat about Jonathan Brooks. And then it seemed to be like a little bit of like, hey, you guys have taken this way, way too far. We're just happy this guy's playing football again, not like going to be the star. But now that we're through middle of August, it does seem to be he's trending towards realizing the promise. Do you think he can handle that volume? And my other thought on this Panthers backfield would be if this doesn't open up for Trevor Etienne to come in and carve out a role and kind of maybe be the Quint Allen or carve out of the role in this backfield. Because I know immediately when camp opened up, he was running with the ones in a 3-back rotation there. And if that's not kind of a sneaky downside on this of he earns a role, now Brooks is kind of establishing himself. Now Chuba Hubbard comes back in and they're rotating 3 backs through this backfield.
Yeah. Since you ended with Achane, I'll start there because he was a 4th-round pick in what looks like a good running back draft, right? When we look
Yeah.
back at the running back draft last year, like that was a good running back draft. So being a 4th-round pick in that draft, and if you go back and look at the touches he did get last year, he belongs. He didn't pop. We're not talking about somebody
Right.
that was, off-season puff pieces written about him, but he looked like he belonged on an NFL field for sure. So absolutely, if you don't believe in Brooks, and there's a way you can do dynasty fantasy football like a flow chart, right? I mean, if you think no way about Brooks, you should be making sure you have Trevor Achane stashed away on your bench. Because Hubbard, we saw last year, had a calf injury, missed 2 weeks, but it really took him like 2 months to be fully healthy. And in that 2 weeks he was out, Rico Dowdle showed enough that we already saw Dave Canales say, now Hubbard's going to be a role player. Well, Brooks, unlike Dowdle, is a very well-rounded running back. Dowdle's
Yeah.
no slouch as a passing down back. But the reason Brooks, coming off of a torn ACL, was a 2nd-round pick was you could watch him at Texas, and my, oh my, he looked like a refined NFL running back. Just his movement, his processing, his pass catching, his decision making. Talk about problem solving, the classic Matt Waldman paradigm of like as a problem solver. Mwah. Brooks looked like that rare 3-down running back right out of the womb. That's why they were. If he's healthy, he's a 1st-round pick. And then you have successive ACL tears in the same leg. We're going to see this. I think Eli Raridan had 2 ACL tears in the same leg. Eric All, who's back. Make sure you pick him up. If you're in a tight end premium league, maybe even if not. One of the background things we have going on here, Jeff, is medical science is advancing. So return to play, how good players are when they return to play, and how whether injuries, like I think Javonte Williams is a guy that I thought was never going to be the same. I was wrong. He's the same now. He's in a good situation too. He's only 25, I think 25, 26, just turned 26. I don't know.
Yep.
I shouldn't pretend to know players' birthdays, but I do know roughly his age. So the other thing I'll toss out here about Brooks is that I'm not saying this is true. I'm going to do that, Jeff. I'm going to do it. But if you were to learn that somebody botched the first surgery, would that change how you viewed this? Would that make you as worried about his long-term durability, or is it at least that like it's his physiology? Because I think with Tank Dell, we're a little worried that just it's the physiology. Like you have to have a certain sort of body density BMI to really be able to hold up under the wear and tear. Like we'll see this with Brennan Thompson. Now Tyler Lockett was a player to an extent people thought that about, and he had a really gnarly leg injury in like his 2nd year, and he was never like, I think there was even better player that we could have seen if that injury hadn't happened, but he still went on to be very fantasy relevant. So I think Tank Dell is like pennies on the dollar from where he was before that. I would say go ahead and buy Tank Dell, see what happens. Don't sell Tank Dell right now. He's still on his own schedule. So, we have in both these cases, is it physiology? And you're just going to keep coming back to this point. Jordan Tyson comes to mind again, or we haven't gotten to him yet. Or is it that between medical technology and this player's determination that has gotten them this far, they're gonna be fine. And Brooks didn't look like dynamic in those few touches he got, but he stayed healthy. And it's possible he'll never be the same after 2 ACL tears in the same knee. However, if he's even like 80 or 90% of the back it looked like he was going to become, then his value is going to go up a lot. His value has a lot more room to go up than to fall right now. So I think this is, again, a good time. I'll tell you this. We're going to look back, Jeff, and we're going to say the perfect move was either to sell or buy Brooks. Brooks, his value is not going to be where it is right now, a month from now. I know that.
Yeah, I mean the perfect move at this point was to have bought Brooks last year was the perfect move, and then if you had done that, and I think so many times, I don't know that acquisition cost really matters, but at the same time, I mean, I work in the tax world where your cost basis does matter there, so like it is struggle
I'll
to divorce the reality, but like the entry level where you could have gotten in on Brooks, especially last year, you're anything's gravy
and
now at this point.
I want to say, since I've got your audience here, what's up? You've got a good leader here, and Jeff. Um, After the rookie drafts last year, and again, we already said this was a good draft for running backs. You might have got Kyle Monangai in the 4th round of your rookie draft last year. A lot of people did. I did in a few of mine. As the rookie drafts were going on, I'm sorry, after the draft, but before the rookie drafts were going on, I said you should consider trading a 3rd or a 4th round pick for Brooks. And boy, did they come out with the long knives and the pitchforks and torches on Twitter. That's stupid. Anybody who follows this person's advice is an idiot. And it might have, I mean, they may have been right. I mean, there was definitely a chance, but my point is this: don't be afraid to do things that 98% of people would say that's just stupid. Because wait a month, all kinds of things happen every single year that make people say that's impossible. If Biff Tannen came back with the answers from this year's season, Jeff, we would tie him up and burn him. We would say that's impossible. What you're saying, you are a heretic. Why are you bringing this around here? Whatever's going to happen, I'll tell you what's not going to happen. The mean or median case of every player's season.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. Just the psychology of one, buy low content, because I feel like if you're not being told you're an idiot when you do buy low
Even
content,
in
you
your
did
own head,
the content
even in your
wrong.
own
Yes,
head, some
exactly.
of the very
Yeah,
best
you're
buy low,
yeah.
sell highs I've done in my head as I'm accepting it or offering it. I'm like, this is stupid. And that doubt tells you there's an opening to get a deal done. That's the thing, is you're probably going to find a like-minded person out there. And it's the hardest trade to make sometimes that is the one that you benefit the most from. And if you don't try those trades, you're never going to hit one.
Exactly. And I think the other part that was a really good point that you made there of how locked into consensus that we get. And I did a dynasty, or not a dynasty, just a regular Reddit with our friends Dave Kluge and Joey Wright yesterday on Reddit, and AMA there. And so many questions were, hey, I have the 5th pick and I really want to take Jonathan Taylor, but he's not supposed to be the 8th player. And it's like, well, this guy was the running back 2 last year. Like none of us know that the top 5 is going to be the top 5 set in stone. So the idea that you can't take Jonathan Taylor at number 5 because he's the number 8 player, like no, like take the guy that you believe, and the guy that you're going to. Don't look back on your team and say, well, I really wanted to take Jonathan Taylor, but I felt like I had to take Christian McCaffrey, and now Christian McCaffrey's injured, and this is not going well for me here. But yeah, I think that so many times the consensus, just feel free to verge outside of the consensus. Don't take a guy that's going to go in the 4th round, 5th overall, but if this guy's at 8th, it's fine. But the Jordan Tyson injury, you led into that a little bit, staying in the NFC South here, that popped up yesterday, and that was something that we kind of had. This is a player throughout the entire process through last year at Arizona State, concerns about these types of soft tissue things, concerns about the physiology potentially of him. Now we've got an injury, we know looks like 2 months is what they're saying, and at that point it feels like it might even be a lost season to some regard. A rookie coming in here and trying to catch a moving train 2 months into the season. What are we really going to get from Jordan Tyson? I think the obvious winner out of this is, I know you've been out there, Juwan Johnson, I think is a big winner out of this, but Devon Vele, I think is a big winner as well. And to me, that those are complementary players to some regard, but it changes the way that the Saints potentially are playing football with having their physicality out of the position. It's almost the exact opposite of had Jordan Tyson been out there regularly. You're definitely in on Johnson over Vele? Are you in on both of these players, or how do you view this situation?
Yeah. Well, Johnson and Vele are both really good acquisitions if you want to get some depth in PPR leagues. Juwan Johnson, remember, he has experience with Tyler Shuck going all the way back to their time at Oregon together, 2019, I think. There's chemistry there for sure. Nick Underhill, again, I trust Nick Underhill. He was saying, I think back in late July, like Juwan Johnson's undervalued in fantasy leagues. And then you have Vele, who I believe Kellen Moore said earlier in the offseason, we should have got the ball to him more. Remember, he joined the team mid-season, speaking about getting on a moving train. Yeah. They gave up like a 4th and a 7th or something like that. They gave up like a sizable amount of draft capital for him, like as much as the Seahawks gave up for Rashid Shaheed to the Saints. Huh. Anyway, and Vele's a really good receiver, big frame over the middle. And we know that this offense is going to be aggressive. So I think Vele's 28 and John's made like 29, but they'll be cheap. If they're sitting on a roster, especially in a PPR league with deep lineups, you can use players like that. With Tyler Shuck, I don't think it was being priced in yet just how much Tyson could lift him. So I don't think that Shuck's so much a loser. If anything, this is a chance to double back and maybe buy him a little bit low. So I was like, oh, it's not going to come together for him because just look at how much they committed around him. And I think you have an idea of what the Saints think about him, and you see what Kellen Moore has done with quarterbacks over the course of his career. We get to Tyson. And I think this is another one of those cases where I promise you, we will look back at this moment right after the injury and say, that was the very best time to buy Jordan Tyson. It was like the day of the injury, the day they announced it was 2 months. Or we will say that was your last chance to get like 80 or 90 cents on the dollar for what you invested. And I really don't know. If you want the glass half full take, it's this. Nick Underhill, again, he was just dazzled by him, starstruck. And he wasn't the only one. There were people at Saints camp that were just like, oh my God. Like just watching the way that Jordan Tyson moves, He's going to be so good. I've never seen a player like this, However, unlike Odell Beckham, before I say Odell Beckham was very durable and played through injuries at LSU. Okay, so yeah, Odell Beckham had a hamstring. Everybody was raving about him, had a hamstring, then got on the moving train midseason and just blew our minds. So Jordan Tyson could do that without a doubt. However, with his injury history and with that worry, remember, this is the same hamstring. I don't care if they say it's not the same injury. He hurt his hamstring, Jeff, in what, like October last year, right?
Yeah.
And then he hurt the right hamstring. And then he aggravated it sometime during the draft process, right? And then they didn't give him full go until July. So you're looking at October to July, like a 10-month hamstring injury, almost 8-9-month hamstring injury. And they said it's not the same injury. I don't care. It's the right hamstring. And at a certain point, you either have to conclude that the physiology of the player cannot support the way they move. Now, Marshawn Lloyd went to the Meyer Institute of Sport. Christian Watson went to Madison, Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin. And I think there's going to be a lot of innovation here where they told, knock on wood, I don't want to bloom Marshawn Lloyd. Christian Watson, I think we're out of the woods with him. And they basically, isn't this interesting? It's like an On the Couch episode, Jeff, where they said it's trauma. Like you hurt yourself, you relearned how to move while you were rehabbing it, but you never relearned how to move the way you did before the injury. So you were putting stress on different joints and soft tissue that it was building up because you weren't moving in a sound way because you were still carrying that trauma. And you need to relearn, right? We can all learn from this, right? So I don't know though, but with Jordan Tyson, I almost wonder if he might fall more into the category of just a player that like the way he moves in his playing style is just not compatible with health. So if it was me, I would probably I would trade Jordan Tyson for Casey Concepcion straight up. I'd be like, "Oop, do over. I wish I would have taken Concepcion. You want to do it?" Something like that. I understand if you don't, but I do think if you have Tyson, this is a question you should be asking yourself. And if you wanted Tyson, you better be firing away offers.
Yeah, I feel like and people that have consumed my content, it when I start talking about wide receivers, I feel like I end up talking about basketball so often on it. And I see you're wearing your Pelicans jersey, but Jordan Tyson, obviously his brother, an NBA player for the Cleveland Cavaliers. But that hamstring scares me in the basketball context because we saw last year was better. 2024, though, we saw a string where Jason Tatum and we saw Tyrese Halliburton were working through hamstring injuries. And obviously they were in the NBA playoffs, the NBA finals, but it led to Achilles injuries because, and as you were talking about that, the compensation of your body and doing those different things there, that hamstring injury for both Tatum and for Halliburton led to Achilles injuries. And so that's where Tyson, hopefully can get this figured out and leveled out and doesn't go down that path. But it's all wide receivers always triggering basketball in my mind. You wearing a Pelicans jersey, Jordan Tyson's brother playing in the NBA. It's all interwoven through there. But player that has emerged as he was one of my favorites from very very early on, and I know he's been one of your favorites here of late, of John Stribling in San Francisco. And seeing the run out there and the physicality and the athleticism that Stribling can add into that room. Obviously, now we've got some level of concern on Christian McCaffrey with what is going on here. That kind of caught me off guard that he had been out for several days of practice, and obviously Christian McCaffrey missing practice at this window of the season. We all kind of have that PTSD back to 2024 on losing him really for the entire season there. But let's talk more about Stribling here. I know our friend Dustin has done some awesome content there with 32 Beat, and they're one of my favorite follows, even before Dustin and before Z got involved there, and they're doing awesome stuff. But we had talked a little bit online yesterday on X about just bringing in that physicality, that Z receiver that can come in and smash into the middle. And I think Stribling's Malachi Fields one of those types of players. But how do you see this run out here on Stribling? And is the environmental concern, and not even environmental talking about a PowerPoint, just environmental concern of the way that we've getting this run out here on San Francisco, one, opening up opportunity for Stribling, but two, does that lower limit the Kyle Shanahan offense in your mind at all?
Well, to your second question, no. I mean,
Yeah.
unless Trent Williams and George Kittle are out, I think that's when things start to grind to a halt. Those are the two most important players for this offense, I think, to maintain its efficiency. Even if Brock Purdy goes down, I think Mac Jones showed he can do a decent job of keeping this offense very viable for fantasy football. Stribling, I'm going to nod. Everyone wants to give me credit for drum beat, but I give the credit to Cecil. I think Cecil was the first one to say, listen for the drum beat. And I mean, how many times do we have to reference Puka Nacua? Because the thing is, if you were paying attention to rookie mini camp news out of LA, right away, people like Jordan Rodriguez were saying, oh, they really like Nacua. Like, wow, like they think he might be able to play right away. That was in like May. Okay. And then every successive item just built on that. And again, we are seeing this with Cyrus Allen. We are seeing this with Jacoby Lane. And look, I wasn't a big Jacoby Lane guy. And I do think of all the guys that we're hearing about, the rookies, the one that might be fraudulent, I don't want to, this is me getting stuck with my priors, Jeff. So you guys can replay this and dunk on me. But he's a guy who should look good in practice. I mean, his game is like spectacular and acrobatic.
Well,
it's
the Ravens corners have been out too. So he's been going up against
it's consistency. It's consistency. Yeah. I mean, the thing is in the NFL, like I remember Seth Williams out of Auburn. Like I remember Seth Williams. Yeah. My gosh, could Seth Williams make the spectacular catch? And he had a length and speed combination that was spectacular. But he flamed out in the NFL because you have to, as an NFL wide receiver, you have to be consistent. Period. You cannot hang in the NFL no matter how good you are when they throw the ball to you if you're not consistent. And I'm not talking about drops, folks. I'm talking about just effort. I'm talking about just like being tuned into the play and doing what you're supposed to do. That's why whenever you started to see that with George Pickens, that's whenever even Dallas got a little bit, persnickety. But Stribling, and you mentioned Dustin, and I feel like I'm contractually obligated to say this because after the draft, we talk, he's a good buddy of mine. And I was like, Stribling, like, I just can't. And he's like, listen, it's the guys like Nacua and Kupp. And he called it the Z wham. It's a Z receiver who can throw a wham block. He's really like a tight end. And the key is that with the new way that these formations work, that if you have someone who can come across the formation and throw a wham block to spring a run, but also out of the same look can insert and release through a run gap, now you're going to get somebody matched up with someone who shouldn't be covering them, or maybe nobody at all. Because there's a couple of things that are like the Zen koans of fantasy football right now. Okay. Number one is you have to be able to run to pass. Teams are going to stay in these too high looks and limiting big plays in the passing game until you punish them with the running game so much, demoralize them that they go back to heavy box, and then you can pass. Woo, pew, pew, pew. Or you do what teams are trying to do with the 2 and 3 tight end sets, and you pass out of heavy sets for explosive plays. Yeah. Or that's number one. You have to be able to run to pass. That's the moment we're in right now. All these quarterbacks going back under center, etc. This is where fantasy football players can be a little too cheeky. Oh, you don't get points for blocks. He's a good blocking wide receiver. I don't care. But you do create fantasy value with your blocking when you can fill this role. Malachi Fields. There's a sign that Malachi Fields might be doing this. Oh, he's just a contested catch merchant on the outside. He is good at that. Things change when you have him releasing through A gap or B gap and getting lined up against a linebacker once he busts through, So we got to watch for this new archetype. And dribbling is this archetype with speed. So we saw what Jawan Jennings could do in this kind of role. Now add speed. All right.
Yeah.
I would say this right now, Jeff, unless you're doing something ridiculous, like 2 first-round picks or something like that, most of the dynasty trades that take, even after the hype, most of the dynasty trades that take place where dribbling moves teams, the team that gets dribbling will win the trade.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point there. And I mean, Pat Bryant's another player that's generating training camp buzz. And so Denver couldn't run the ball at all last year. How do you answer the run? I mean, get better offensive line, have different schemes, sure. But at the same time, when you rotating those wide receivers between Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin, and Pat Bryant, one of those guys is going to put you in the dirt. The other two are definitely not. And so if you can't run the ball, then you've got to figure out different ways to create it. And the other, thinking that you're talking about that Z-Wham block, and so often we see Tucker Kraft being that player that releases and just doesn't get covered. Tucker Kraft gets more 60-yard touchdowns than like everybody in the league because he is just punishing guys over and over again. And at some point, you're making a business decision when you see Tucker Kraft coming down the edge on you again, and he gets that free release and he's gone out the backside of it. And so I think that's how that blocking comes into play on it, and just the punishment that you can deliver over and over again to the point where the defensive back's just ready to give up, and that's where you hit those big plays and get created out of that. But I think it's.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to say this discreetly, like in a very specific way while we're on this topic, okay? Being a good blocker as a wide receiver can create fantasy value because coordinators, play designers can do more with you as a receiver when the defense has to honor you as a blocker.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to dictates the personnel on the defensive side. And that's what the offense is always trying to do. But all right, we've mentioned Cyrus Allen on this several times. And to me, the biggest Cyrus Allen is a player that I did like as we were going through the rookie guide. I liked him as a prospect. He's definitely a day 3 player and off the radar a little bit. My hang up, and I feel like it's you, like you said, this is an episode of On the Couch. But my hang up with Cyrus Allen is I have just been rug pulled repeatedly by this Chiefs beat team between Darwin Thompson and Carson Steele and Jalen Royals and Carnell Powell and Sky Moore. It seems like more than any other team, the Chiefs beat has sold these day 3 players or these later picks or even day 2 players of coming in and making a huge impact and then just fizzle out, don't do anything. Why is Cyrus Allen going to be different here?
He's going to be different because Patrick Mahomes likes throwing the ball to him. I think that and you're right that we need to, and I get taken in like anybody else. I'm not going to say that I'm above it. That subjective reports out of training camp, we at least want to look for agreement, like the Jordan Tyson's awesome stuff. But really what should cement it is objective data, right? Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion are running with the first team now. Casey Concepcion got the touch, ball 4 times early. And in this particular case, it is that Cyrus Allen was working with the ones and persisting in that, even after he got banged up on a special teams gunner drill. And they're saying it's every day. And they're saying this about Denzel Boston too. It's every single day in practice. Every single day he does something that makes people like, whoa. But what they observed was Patrick Mahomes is throwing the ball to this guy, and they're in tune. Roshy Rice is still not fully healthy. I forget who it was, Jeff. There was a little Twitter thing that was like, people are just realizing Roshy Rice is not actually a good route runner. You know, he's not really. He
I,
just
I think I think David said
was it
something to
Dave?
the effect of
Yeah.
people are realizing that
Uh, it,
that basically yes.
so imagine what somebody who can move like Cyrus Allen, because that's the thing about. I didn't understand why Cyrus Allen didn't get a combine invite. I have still, Jeff. If any of your sources or anybody has information, get back to me and tell me, because I'm like, well, how did this guy not get a combine invite? Because you watch him and just the way he moves. I mean, look, you do this long enough. I'm not trying to say I have special knowledge. It's just that like I've had so many shots at it that I've learned a few things. And there's just some guys like Jordan Tyson. The way you want it to be consistent. You want them to do it the same way every time, which Tyson's still working on. But there's some guys, there's like the way they move. I'm thinking like big boy speaker. I like the way you move. I mean, sometimes it's just that simple, right? You're just like, wow. And we're just talking about rookies and sorting out who has potential and who doesn't. So that was already there with Cyrus Allen. And we are in an offense that someone who is a similar kind of player, but not nearly as dynamic and Rice. And look at the numbers he can put up, you know? Tyquan Thornton, who I loved this year as a potential breakout guy, at least in a best ball kind of way, he limped off with a hamstring. Okay. Xavier Worthy, he's fine. His shoulder's fine. It's the same shoulders last year, but he's fine. He's another guy that might fit into that conversation of his physiology just isn't compatible with the kind of role. And it was really interesting to me, by the way, that Andy Reid said there was a bunch of stuff we wanted to do with Xavier Worthy last year, and then when he got hurt, we scrapped it. Okay. How did he get hurt? And in the history of football, do you recall this, Jeff? Someone like, how did he bust up his shoulder? He ran into his teammate. What? I mean, Travis Kelce is like pretty solidly built, but isn't like he ran into Darnell Washington and got sandwiched in between like him and Broderick Jones or something, you know? So I think, and Worthy's one of those guys like, until I see it, I won't believe it. Bryce, people don't know. He hasn't even had 1,000-yard year yet, you know? What does that tell you? Just for him to put it all together is not always in the cards, you know? So there's a range of outcomes here, unlike with the Jacoby Lane, unlike with the Caleb Douglas, who's now, you know, he gets a little murkier with Chris Bell activated from NFI. You know, absolutely Cyrus Allen has a top end range of outcomes to catch like at least like a Wandale Robinson 2025 kind of season. And that's not even the top end. That's just like, if none of these guys can stay healthy, we're going to get that for sure. Because we already know that Andy Reid trusts him and Patrick Mahomes trusts him. So I agree with you that we have to be careful when we see a pattern with beat writers. But I think in this case, it's what Patrick Mahomes is showing us that we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, I think Allen is that type of player. I think Casey Concepcion is that type of player. It's almost that new age slot where the old, like the Wes Welker, where Wes Welker will carve you up in that short game, but now because of the just the size that's being put on the field, multiple tight ends, it's that guy that used to be the vertical threat, but also it's like Wandale Robinson's a perfect example where Wandale Robinson, former running back, and then came out as really just an underneath guy, but he's got verticality in his game, and he was able to unlock it with the Giants, unlocked it at Kentucky. That's kind of the new slot archetype, and that's where I think Allen's path to success potentially lies, of what the team's looking for. And in a perfect world, Xavier Worthy would be a high end outcome of that, but potentially he's just, like you said, just not built to be able to handle that role. But it's different than the old Wes Welker slot receiver, which I think those players, it's tougher now to carve out a role the way the NFL is shifting and building their offenses out. I know you have been on the O'Marion Hampton Chargers backfield timeshare for a while now, and Mike McDaniel had the quote heard round fantasy last week coming out and saying this is going to be a hot hand. I thought Chargers are one of the teams that I cover for training camp, and I kind of had a eureka moment because I had heard that and see that sentence pulled out, and I listened to the full McDaniel press conference on Saturday night as I was working on my report, and literally right before that, McDaniel says O'Marion Hampton's going to be a guy that's going to get opportunity to have a ton of volume in this offense. And then he goes, well, wait a minute, this seems like a fantasy question, and this is going to be a hot hand. And to some regard, I think it's fascinating because we know we're smart media and knows what's going to get clicks, knows what's going to get traction, knows what's going to do work out there. Chris Rim was the guy that originally had it. He does a really good job for ESPN for the Chargers. So I'm not going to say that there's anything nefarious or anything to that regard, but it was the eureka moment when I listened to the whole thing with McDaniel of him saying Hampton's going to have a ton of volume in this offense. And that's what makes sense to me. I know are we pricing Hampton correctly? Is it getting there now because of this quote, because of these concerns here, or is it just way still over the skis, do you think?
Well, in Dynasty, I mean, I get it. Uh, it's hard to say he's overpriced in Dynasty because he's paired up with Mike McDaniel. In redraft, I know this is Dynasty show. I'll just say real quick redraft. The case I had been making all offseason is he was being drafted in the early second round, which was his ceiling, and we just don't draft players at a ceiling. It's just not good business. I mean, he can't possibly surpass that. And people saying, no, no, no. He caught 30 passes last year. Devin Achan. I mean, Devin Achan, when he was running back when McDaniel caught like 78 passes. Okay. First of all, let's get the Omarion Hampton receiving ability. He's not a liability as a receiver, but go back and watch his catches last year. They were dump offs. He's not a route runner. He's not a guy who's going to like beat you down the sideline on a wheel route or win on a choice route. He might be a competent pass blocker, but it's not like a strength of his game. And then let's get to Marion Hampton's running style. Okay. He is in the category of Derrick Henry, of Brandon Jacobs. These are running backs with size speed combinations that are irresistible when their shoulders are square to the line of scrimmage. If you get them to turn their shoulders perpendicular to the line of scrimmage, or if you get them to stop their feet, you have them defeated. That's just the kind of running back they are. I've not seen a Marion Hampton show as a processor, as someone who can like break down in his hips or his footwork, like make decisions in the course of a run. Go back and watch all of his good runs last year. They're straight line runs. I mean, you aim him at different points at the line, but they're not subtle runs. They're not runs where he's making decisions and having to be nimble and use his vision and let things develop. Okay. Mike McDaniel is telling us, here's my quote to encapsulate it all, Jeff. The Chargers are the kind of offense where 11 different players are going to score in the first 11 weeks. Okay. Mike McDaniel, I think, is super excited. And if you're really excited about the Chargers, I think Justin Herbert and to a lesser extent McConkey, because of that discount you're getting, because people aren't factoring in that he was hurt all year last year. Because McConkey's the Tyreek Hill. Okay. With Brennan Thompson as an occasional, like, put the Tyreek Hill mask on and he can do some plays where he's Tyreek Hill. But there's going to be, why is Mike McDaniel so giddy? Because he can run like the Cheesecake Factory playbook. I mean, he has players. He has 3 tight ends. He has 5. He has big wide receivers who can block. He has fast wide receivers who can run deep. He has guys who can play a slot. He has guys who can play outside. He has a wide receiver who can play as a tight end. He has a tight end who's a blocker who maybe is an underrated receiver, and another tight end who is old but was one of the most athletic tight ends when he's healthy. Running back, you've got Hampton, but you've also got Mitchell, best acceleration in the NFL, and you've got Kamani Vidal, who can do a little bit of everything. So in the course of a game or in the course of the season, some weeks Mike McDaniel is going to look at the opponent or look at the trend of the game and say, this is the part of the playbook that we need to stay in now. And that's not always going to be Omarion Hampton. There are going to be games, Jeff, where Marion Hampton has like 3 touchdowns and 150 total yards, and people are like, I knew it. And then next week, he's going to have 10 carries for 33 yards and 1 catch for 4 yards. And Mitchell's going to have 8 carries for 64 yards, and Vidal's going to get like 9 carries for 45 yards and 3. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not going to be week to week. Mike McDaniel is going to come up with a different game plan depending on the opponent that week. And in any plays where you're stretching the defense and you're having the running back make decisions, that's Mitchell. That's not Hampton. He's going to be in a very similar role, I think, than what Derrick Henry does for Baltimore. And that didn't keep Derrick Henry from being a first-round quality running back, but you got to get to like 18, 20 touchdowns. You got to have, 3, 4, 5 breakaway touchdowns during the year. Can Hampton do that? Yes. But going around ahead of Derrick Henry, who has already done it, that don't make no sense.
Yeah, I'm there, and I hear you, and I agree, and I've got Hampton a tier below that second round tier running backs, but I have him right there. But he's would be the last player out of that group that I would take, but you're always seeing him going much higher than that. But that's awesome. And no, I think it's Mike McDaniel's a guy we were talking before the show, just waking up and being content. And I'm a big fan of McDaniel. I know you're a fan of McDaniel, and just his attention to detail. I mean, this is an example. Justin Herbert switched which leg he was starting with when he gets the snap, because McDaniel had done a similar change with Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan, when he made that change, was when he won the NFL MVP that season, when McDaniel made that change, and just something like that. And I think that McDaniel's seeing, after going from Tua Tagovailoa and what's happened with Tua Tagovailoa, now Justin Herbert unlocks everything.
Yeah,
Everything is on the table with
yeah,
Herbert.
and this is important for Dynasty. I mean, I do think before you even get into individual player takes, you should have team takes. And this should make you bullish on Chargers in general, because there was a clip out there that I think is a great clip, and it isn't quite as breathtaking as the Mahomes to Tyreek Hill and triple coverage 70-yard touchdown, whatever it was in preseason, to be like, oh, this is going to be different now. You know what I think of Doc Brown, where we're going, we don't need roads or whatever it is, right? And that moment for Mike McDaniel was a clip that got circulated of Justin Herbert, and Mike McDaniel, like, you got to have a big arm to make this throw. Let's see. And then Justin Herbert lets it go, and it's like, I think he probably had to change his underwear. He was just
Yeah.
like a good, in a good way, to be like, oh, and just like you could sell, like he's like, oh my God, what I'm gonna be able to do with this quarterback. And what's really fascinating is we don't usually get these counterfactuals where it's like, well, what if Miami drafted Justin Herbert and Herbert got to work with Mike McDaniel? What would that look like? Guess what? Yeah, we get to see that now. But they did just lose Tyler Biadasz. Got breaking news: Biadasz, who they I don't know why Washington let him go, but they signed him, and he was, I think, a pretty good center for a Mike McDaniel scheme. But they carted off Biadasz. And Rashawn Slater, remember, the tackles are going to be healthy. Well, Rashawn Slater's still not back yet from that patellar. So just know this about the Chargers. First couple of weeks are pretty easy. You might get this idea that Mike McDaniel's going to just maraud through the league. If you look at the schedule, the rest of the first half is pretty rough. I don't have it in front of me, Jeff, but it's rough. So you may have to see one of these situations where people were feeling like, well, the Chargers were a bunch of hype, but it doesn't happen until the second half of the season if it's these offensive line injuries continuing to hold them back.
Yeah, and thank you so much for mentioning Brennan Thompson as well, because I feel like so much in content people do nobody's talking about player that everybody's talking about. Mike McDaniel got the fastest player in the 2026 NFL draft, who led the SEC in receiving
He
yards
can play
last
receiver.
year.
He's not
And
Zachariah Branch.
He's not a track guy.
No.
He is a football player. And yeah, there is a lot there and yeah, we start talking about 4 different targets there potentially. But I mean, that's where we are at this point. This offense can unlock so many things. I mean, you're in these deep best ball leagues. Brennan Thompson, there's worst 20-round picks that are regularly getting taken than Brennan Thompson at the very, very end of your draft. And feel free to talk about football, whatever even though we're labeled the Dynasty Show, this is a football show, and we talk about football all levels. Sig, thank you so much for joining me here today, and I really, really do appreciate it. You want to tell the people anything that they need to know or anything here?
Yeah. So. Well, first of all, who do you trust? But get this: if you haven't gotten one, they're going to sell out, and what I'm really excited about the Football Guys draft guide is, it's all football guys. We did it ourselves. Yeah. It's not on a newsstand. It's not filled with a bunch of ads that are like somebody is letting us, put our customer base and you want to buy this? Do you want to buy this? No. It's all fantasy football. And I know there's some good articles in here like Joe and Joey. There's a lot of stuff that's not just red meat fantasy football. But what I love is that we've staked out this territory. Like, we are still about the analog world. We're still from the analog world, and we still want to create things that are existing in this analog way, where we're working with each other to create things that we're excited about, like seeing your name in print, and having something you take to the bathroom or the beach or mark up. I'm excited. Jeff, I'm going to let go some secrets here. I told Joe, like, there's all kinds of stuff we should be putting in here. Like, you should get your magazine and like stuff should just fall out of it. Like, what did you get? I got some of Jeff Bell's football card collection. Ooh, wow. I got a Fred Smirless. Can't believe he would put that in there, because that's like a Bills legend, 1977. We just love sharing this experience with everybody and with each other even, like Jeff Blaylock, I just did the other Jeff B. And he was saying like, oh, I actually hit record this time. Oh man, I could tell you some stories about the shows we lost because of technical problems or user error. But Jeff, I would enjoy just hanging out here and talking for this hour, even if it wasn't for anyone but the two of us. And I think that what we're doing at Football Guys embodies that love of the game, participation, joy of participation, of making friends and being in each other's lives and sharing these experiences. And I'm just excited. This is that click, click, click on the roller coaster. We're all waiting. We're gonna puke on each other. We're gonna scream. We're gonna laugh. We're gonna get dizzy. But we're gonna remember it, and we'll always be able to say, "You remember when you were there too." Every season is special to me.
I can't do it any better. I do want to say, if you're still here hanging out, Joe and I will be at the Southern Bluegrass Fantasy Football Championship this weekend in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Please do say hi. We love y'all. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.